Is dead.
Shut up!
We're live. Hey, this is Alex with the Dresden Files podcast. Today I have my fellow guests Justin
Hello.
and our director Alex.
Hello.
Director Alex. This podcast is completely not spoiler free. We spoil all the books and the future books. Anything we know about the future books, we're going to talk about. This is also an explicit language podcast. We use foul language because we're sailors. Today we're going to talk about a little bit of news, and then we're going to talk about some Norse mythology and its relationship to the series. First bit of news, Jim Butcher posted the following tweet last week. Let me grab it here.
Remember what we said about spoilers, so this
Yes.
is future stuff. It's okay to run and hide for, the next 5 minutes.
Someone tweeted at Jim Butcher, "What part of Peace Talks are you writing right now?" He tweets back, "Murphy's funeral," with silly faces. So yeah, Karen Murphy's dead.
Shut the fuck up.
What do we think about that? No, so there's been, we're going to talk about it more later, but there's been a couple of theories that either she's...
Fuck you, shut up, it's not happening. La 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 la.
Either she's dead and become a Valkyrie, which is what we're going to talk about, or it's a flashback to what's Karen Murphy's father's name? Charlie Murphy?
Colin.
Colin Murphy's death. So I guess we have to wait and see what happens. Oh man, you guys, this book's going to be a killer, huh?
I mean, kind of literally. I mean,
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the most supernaturally violent book ever.
Yeah.
So there's pretty good weight that it's both things, but without, touching on some of what Alex is going to talk about, the consensus was that on the one hand, it's totally like him to do something like that, and on the other hand, there's no way that he just spoiled like the biggest event of the next book. So that's the one that I'm going to cling to until I read it myself, so.
I don't believe she's dead. Nuh-uh. Even if she's dead, she's coming back. You can't convince me otherwise.
Well, how many people can come back in the same series, right? Harry's already come back. How many other people can come back from death?
I think if you were to use it on anyone other than Harry, it would be Murphy.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty popular theory that that Murphy's going to die and come back as a Valkyrie. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. The other piece of news, I attended Kineticon last weekend, and I went to a really awesome Dresden Files panel. We had kind of just this really awesome open discussion about a lot of different things. We talked about the Outsiders, the Walkers. We talked about how Lacuna probably works for the Tooth Fairy. I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I met some really awesome people. If you are at Kineticon, don't forget to reach out to us, and other viewers and listeners should reach out to us at DresdenFilesPodcast@gmail.com. That's our email. The Twitter is twitter.com/DresdenCast. You can see us at our website, DresdenFilesPodcast.com. You can find the first 2 episodes on iTunes. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to store audio so we can get the rest of the episodes up. You can search us on YouTube, Dresden Files Podcast. We're under the channel Dresden Files Space Cast. I think that's everything, right, Justin? And Alex?
Sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get started with the Norse mythology stuff. Alex, go for it.
Right, so I was able to take a Norse mythology class, and the paper I had to write on it had to be something in modern media that interpreted Norse mythology, so I went with Dresden Files and just took off with it. It was a much bigger rabbit hole than I thought it was going to be. Because, like, the major characters are just, like, Sigrun Gard, Donar Vadarung, and the Einherjar, and yet there's a lot more than I thought originally. So to start with, like, the sense of magic that have, like, in the Dresden Files there's like the wizardry and then there might be something else, but in the Norse mythology there's a very big difference between the different types of magic that they use. There's Sade, and then there's like runic magic, and you can see Gard using the runes all the time. Like in death masks, she used it and it hurt Bob, and she did it a lot more in favor and stuff. But Sade is something very specific in Norse mythology. It's actually considered a womanly thing, so it's a perversion if a man does it, but Odin does it all the time. He's the one who created it and he uses it, so it's like a slight against him when he uses it. But in the short story Heorot, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Grendelkin calls Dresden a Sadermater, which basically just means like spellcaster, or it could mean like spell mother because it's still a feminine thing. And it's a very specific thing that the Sade is a connection between Dresden and Vadarung Odin. Yeah, and it's got more things with it. Uh, that when Vadarung shows up, it changes. He does so with the Great Council as a wizard. He's performing wizardry, and Vadarung taught Merlin. There's a connection directly from Odin to Harry, also along the magic lines. It's very specific that Sade is wizardry. It's important.
Nice. I had no idea. That's awesome. That's a huge connection. So
Ooh, yeah. And the way that Guard uses the runes is a lot more specific. In fact, I think she uses a runic carved knife to cut open ways to the Never Never, and she does so when in changes to take Harry to Oslo. One of the ways from the Never Never to Oslo was by cutting into, I think, a giant tree, which has got to be Yggdrasil, which is the world tree that holds everything in place, and all bad guys, all good guys, and different worlds and stuff. He described it as being big enough he could fit his entire apartment in the trunk of it with enough room for a garage left over. Huge. Yeah. And the descriptions of Valhalla in the books are kind of specific, well, in the Norse text, because it's supposed to have 540 doors, but their hundreds are more like 120 rather than actual 100. So he's got like 700 doors in Valhalla, and 800 warriors will go through from door to door when they fight the wolf, like at a time, 800 people. They're supposed to be so huge. The descriptions of it in the text says that there's shields on the roof to protect it, and you can kind of see that in changes when top of Monarch Security Headquarters is done all in metal. It's kind of shieldy, sort of. And then there's the receptionists that don't really talk, but they look like twins and really, really black hair and black eyes and kind of dangerous. They've got to be the raven that Odin's known for, Hugin and Munin, which mean thought and memory. They're very strange. The fact that only the one that Veteran called M is the one that talks seems kind of specific, and I thought that there was something out there that only Munin could talk, but other things I found says that both of them can talk, so it's kind of conflicting. But there's a passage that I thought was important in the sayings of Grimnismal, if you look it up. Hugin and Munin fly every day over the world. I fear for Hugin that he will not come back, yet I tremble more for Munin. It seems like that could be a hint to something bad happening to Vadarung's abilities and receptionists.
So, what do you think is Radarong's like? Did you learn anything about his level of power?
Kind of going to get into that a little bit later, and I talk about a little bit more of conspiracies and how everything fits together. So I'll just tell you more what I found out, and you can make your own decision. Maybe we can talk about it.
Okay.
And the fact that Vadarung uses aliases uh, is very matching up with the way Norse mythology works. In the Norse mythology, there's kennings, which is just like how you know about the people if you're not just talking about their name. Like one for Odin would be Thor's father, and that's actually what Vadarung kind of means. Donar is named for Thor, but it's more of a Germanic origin rather than a Scandinavian origin. And well, Vader is just like Darth Vader, father person. So just like his way of saying Thor's father for himself, among the other names that he must have taken. And then Odin became Wotan in Germania, which became our word for Wednesday. It's Woden's Day.
And that's why I wear my Monarch security shirt every Wednesday. So,
I should have worn it today too.
yeah, I
But
think I already wore it on Wednesday, so that was the problem.
yeah, but Wotan went on to becoming Kringle and our version of Santa Claus, which is why Batarung is also a Santa Claus Kringle person. And the fact that he wears these different masks so easily is a matchup with Odin's personality, that he disguises himself and goes into other people's halls and talks to them, and sometimes they die, sometimes he gets just a bunch of information. Like he uses the name Grimnir and Gestumblindi and all sorts of weird things. It's very normal for him to put on masks and mantles, as we would put it. Yeah. So Cold Days is a fantastic book if you're thinking of anything with Norse mythology, and something that got to me a lot was when reading basically when Odin is telling people how to live a virtuous life. He gets really into it about friends. In the middle of talking like how to live in moderation, don't drink too much, and blah blah blah, don't stay like too long at a host guest and whatever. He keeps talking about how important friends are and how a man isn't anything if he doesn't have friends to love him. And in Cold Days, when Harry doesn't have anything, he's trying to get information out of Vadarung. He doesn't even have a nickel. And in exchange of a favor, Vadarung leans over and is like, "What do you have?" And turns around and he has friends. And at the end of Cold Days, that's exactly what he said too to Sharkface. I have friends, and they help him.
Nice.
Yeah. And along with Cold Days, it's, oh boy. There's this thing in Norse mythology when I'm learning about it of cyclical timelines that really is kind of unfair when you're trying to put everything together. Kind of to do with the magic too. So the Aesir and the Vanir are two different types of gods, and way back when they were fighting. And in a peace effort, everybody came together and spit in a pot of goodwill, and that pot with all the spit became a person named Kvasir. And Kvasir was called to be more knowledgeable than anyone else. Specifically, the phrasing was no one could ask him a question that he didn't know the answer to. And a couple of dwarves decided to kill him, drain him, and make his blood into mead, which is one of the origins of magic in the mythology. And Odin eventually got his hands on it, drank it all down, took it away from the dwarves, and then threw it back up in Asgard. And by drinking the mead, he became magical too. But one of the theories is that Kvasir became magical, well, his blood did, because Odin spit into the pot. But Odin got the magic from Kvasir, from having to do it. This weird, crazy, cyclical timeline. And everybody else in the class was confused about it. I was like, oh my god, it's just like Cold Days. The island's going to blow up because the island's going to blow up. It made perfect sense to me.
Nice.
Yeah, and it made it a lot easier for me. And there's the weird, crazy timeline things, and the fact that in the stories, Odin almost definitely had to be traveling through time once or twice for everything to make sense. Like he knows what's going to happen in Ragnarok, but he could only have known some of it originally if he had gone through it the first time. At least that's the way it makes the most sense.
Well, my kind of interpretation was that he was omniscient, or that he was living in all times at all times.
I think he's much more human than that. Odin is known for having to actively go out and get information. He goes to people and he gets into wisdom contests, and generally the other people die. And he gets more information of what's going to happen in Ragnarok. He goes and talks to Osiris and Osiris' prophecy, and he gets a bunch of information. He has to actually investigate with it. And then he has Hugin and Munin that go out and get information and bring it back. And he has other help too. And he has to actually investigate rather than just being omniscient.
Well, there's a difference between knowing all things and existing in all times at the same time.
Yeah.
What is the word for that? Not omnipresent, because that's existing in all space at the same time. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, if you ask Einstein, space-time's really the same thing. So
Yeah, so maybe it's omnipresent.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's what it would be.
I don't see how that fits for Odin in any of his things. He seems like a person that was very knowledgeable, that it had to get information and do very human things to get stronger.
Well, in a way, that's kind of a thing of wisdom, anyways. You don't run around saying how much you know more than everybody else. It makes you kind of a target. So,
Yeah, and that's exactly what he says in Things the High One. He's like, the smart man knows when to shut up, the dumb man doesn't know when to shut up, essentially. Um, I'm a little confused on which topic I should go to next. But, okay. So I don't know much about Greek mythology, but in Cold Days, when Harry is trying to summon Mother Winter, he calls her by a couple of different names, one of them being Atropos. And I think that is one of the like three old crones that like past, present, future, and
right.
Atropos being the future, I think. But the other name he calls her is Skuld. And there's an analog of those crones in Greek mythology. In Norse mythology, they're called norns. And there's three of them. They basically mean past, present, future, sort of. Um, I have them all written down over here. The fated one is called Becoming Another, Must Be the Third. And otherwise, the names are Weird, Verdandi, and Skuld. And Skuld being the one that he calls Mother Winter. And Skuld also kind of seems to be representing the future and what's going to happen. So basically, winter is coming, is the basic idea that I got from that.
Okay, so here's the problem I have with the three old crones thing, and maybe I'm not quite getting it, but it seemed like, maybe summer and winter, but maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, and it needs to be like the three ladies, because if it's like summer and winter, who's the third? That that's always what I had problems with currently Butcher's thing, but maybe it is more like, the three queens and the fates and the, old hags and that sort of thing. You just kind of lose me at the hag part with the winter lady, for example.
Well, the Norns were never described as old. They were actually described as girls. So they were just basically women. They never like had to be the old things. And you can kind of get the past, present, future with the maiden mother or maiden, queen, and mother. But it seemed to be if you were going to have past, present, future split between two people, you have the past being one, which I would say is summer, your birth, and the future being your death in winter, and present being split between them in balance.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And that brings up the question of if Mother Winter is Skuld, does she owe something to Vadarung? Because in the Norse mythology, the Norns were a thing in Asgard. Well, sort of. They were both at Yggdrasil and at Asgard, and they were like consulted as to what's going to happen. They created fates for men. They decided when people died, and they saw the futures and things. Skuld was also the name of a Valkyrie, so that could be a connection there. But it's kind of ambiguous as to whether Odin ruled over the Norns or they ruled over him, or more likely just very ambiguous in however it was dealt with anyway. So the connections between the fairy and the Never Never and Odin Vadarung get really murky there, and we need to find out more. Hmm. Yeah, another one is a little bit more on the conspiracy side. There is a character in Norse mythology that's very much like Bob. His name is Mimir. He came from the same story as Kvasir. He was somebody that was traded to the Vanir, and they thought that he was a shitty counselor, so they chopped his head off, sent it back to Odin. And Odin took him and dipped it into Weird's well at Yggdrasil, and then it became Mimir's well. And he was just a talking skull person that would tell Odin of things that was going on. It was another one of the ways of getting information and wisdom. And the fact that there's just such a nice comparison between Bob and Mimir makes me really wonder what would happen if Batarang picked up Bob. Or where did Bob actually come from? Because he's kind of a spirit, but he's kind of not. And more with Cold Day's thing is there was repeated insistence that because it was Harry's island, he's the one that needs to deal with Demon Reach. And particularly, both Vadarung and Rashid says that because he's died, there have been new things opened up to him. It's made him a fulcrum, Vadarung says. Odin killed himself at the tree of Yggdrasil. He hung himself for 9 days and stabbed himself with a spear. And that's how he came up with Thaid in runes. I think that was Thaid. Actually, I think there's fighting over whether he made Thaid there, but he came back with runes. And so he died and came back with more power, which is the same thing that Vadarung and Rashid both say to Harry in Cold Days. Also to note, all three of them have the matching scars of having lost an eye, except Harry still kept his. It made me, as a joke once to myself, I was trying to figure out if Rashid was Vadarung. I found out there is a lot of parallels and not many much to say that they're not the same person.
That would be heavy, and now I'm trying to think. I don't think you've seen them at the same place at the same time, even in changes. That's amazing.
Yeah, the only
Yeah,
thing.
because the whole eye thing. So,
Well, there's more to that in their descriptions. They're both wizards. They're both really powerful. They both deal with time. Rashid seems to have a knack for dealing with time things, and Odin deals with time as well as Earl King says to Kringle when they're going off to fight the outsiders, like the time is his specialty when they're trying to deal with the warping of time passage. Both have the scars and they're missing an eye, although it is never ever mentioned which one that Vadarung actually lost. It's very ambiguous, and I hate Butcher for that. And they're both around the same age description-wise. They're both really, really tall. The only thing that I say that proves that they're not the same person is that Rashid swears by Muhammad. And why would Vadarung be doing that?
well, I mean, mantles, he's not just wearing like different power, he's literally a different person because he didn't make the connection between Kringle and Vadarung until much later. They are actually physically separate beings, I think. So it's more than just a mask in the sense that it's like more like a skin suit or a costume that he puts on and he just becomes this other thing is kind of how I've interpreted it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how far into his personality does a mantle change him when he's wearing a different mask. I don't know. We'll have to find out more about that. And
Right.
probably they're not the same person. It's just
Very
funny.
suspicious. Yeah. Well, I think the mantles are more important in the sense that you can't actually wield one that it doesn't suit you personally. So it's not like Kringle's ever going to pick up the mantle of Mab or something and just become a fairy king or a fairy queen or something. Like it's the same thing in Cold Days. You get a lot of that with the ladies. So basically you have Molly and oh crap, what's her face? Anyway, the Mab's other daughter, and they were specifically groomed, and in a way they already kind of fit the mold for those mantles. The mantle can only go to somebody who is similar enough to that anyway. So, in this case, I really don't think that the region that they were, it's interesting to have the Norsemen contrasted with the Middle Eastern mage, basically the guy who fought the Mad Arab for crying out loud. But at the end of the day, they are similar enough. They've got the same kind of value system, same kind of power set. Like that seems to be more how the mantles work. No one, Harry's not going to pick up one of the Winter Queen mantles because he just doesn't fit. He doesn't have the wiring for it metaphysically and otherwise. So.
No, just remembering more of the things that they say in changes, or no, Cold Days. They just say really similar things. Like they have very similar values, or at the very least, they have the same information source somewhere. Rashid says that Harry has done pretty much everything he has in order to be a problem to the outsiders, even if he didn't know it. And Vadarung says very much the same thing. I think he said that in Changes. they've always been on the same side, and it's all connected and things like that. They're both aware of what's going on in a way that Harry is not. Like, Harry doesn't seem to know that there's a big apocalyptic trilogy that's coming up, and we all do. And everybody else does too. Mab knows, Nicodemus knows, Batarang obviously knows. And the connections between the fact that there's going to be an apocalyptic trilogy and Ragnarok is just a giant parallel. Something bad is going to happen. And also, Batarang has a favor that he can call on. What the hell is that going to be? It's probably going to be an entire book. Yay. And
we'll call it big favor this time instead of small favor. So,
but that doesn't match the numbers. Yeah, it doesn't match the numbers. Frosty favor, does that count? I don't know. But it seems really weird to me that Harry doesn't get it yet, that there's gonna be an end of days that's coming, and everybody else does.
I think that would be evident in the fact that he doesn't think it's a foregone conclusion, and that he's thwarting them as they come up. Like Nicodemus and his plague and death masks and stuff like that. So, for everybody else, it's a thing that's going to happen, and they've been around for a while. They've probably seen this sort of thing happen. Like, something knocked the Greek gods off the list, basically. But for Harry, he's like, dude, I've stopped everybody. I've stopped Nicodemus twice. I've stopped, pick your poison. Which bad guy has he not beaten? So for him, it's just another thing to punch in the face until it leaves everybody alone.
Yeah, I guess. It's just, I don't know, something's happening. And it's getting to the point that it feels weird that Harry doesn't recognize it, since everybody else does, including all of the readers. Just the fact that we know that there's going to be an apocalyptic trilogy. And, I don't know, anyway, everybody else is preparing for it in more obvious ways. In the fact that, okay, Nicodemus is trying to get power, obviously. Marcone is also getting power. In fact, he's working very closely with Batarang with all the Einherjar, and incurring debts both ways, probably. So whatever it is, Vatarang's also going to be using Marcone. And everybody's getting training. Everybody is getting used to having to fight, and so that by now, they're much better than they ever have been before. Changing subject slightly, Things of the High One, the poem, has Odin talking to this person. His name begins with an L. It's Lodfafnir. I have no idea how I'm pronouncing that. I'm probably screwing it up. And I have no idea who this person is. He doesn't ever come up again. But it is clear that Odin is trying to teach someone. He's giving advice to, tons and tons of advice. And it's also known that Odin and Loki had a very odd personality relationship with each other. Loki is the only other person who practiced save, and both of them get flack for that. And if Loki practiced save, then that means that he's a wizard in the Dresden verse. And if Odin taught Merlin, is Merlin Loki?
I would say no on that, but just because I'm not like super deep into Norse mythology, I definitely need to know more about it. But my understanding with Loki is that he's specifically a trickster, and he's, I don't know. I always get the impression he's more like, because it's funny is a good enough reason to do something. And certainly he tries to take power for himself and things like that in numerous points. But like the Merlin. Certainly the way I feel like it's being set up in the Dresden verse is like, certainly he's wily and he's a fox, like a cunning fox as far as like the immortals are concerned, but everything he has ever done has been to protect humanity, and not in the twisted sense that Nicodemus thinks that he's one of the good guys, in the actual sense that he's the dude standing between the and you can feel that even in the White Council, that they are the force standing between the immortals and mortals. They are that regulation that says, nope, I don't think you're going to come down here and meddle with us today.
Well, there's more about Loki than just that he's a trickster. They described in the class that there's 3 types of Lokis. There's the good, the bad, and the trickster. And the good, he actually helps out sometimes. He helps Thor get Mjolnir back when that got stolen. He's a trickster all the time. He actually pulled a trick on Thor, and the result of that is Thor got Mjolnir. And everybody else got tons of stuff. He destroyed Sif's hair, he goes back to the dwarves, and he gets tons of stuff, including more hair, Mjolnir. There's a ship for Freyr that can like fit in the pocket and is awesome. And Odin got a spear, which is the same spear he's used in Changes. It's called Ginu something. I have no idea how to pronounce that. So he's a trickster in the way that kind of like a fairy is a trickster. He has to take something away in order to give something bigger back. And it seems that Loki does that too consistently for me to feel that it's just he wants to raise hell. But when he's bad, he's unwholesomely bad. He doesn't do anything nice with it. And he was basically the biggest reason for Ragnarok happening. He's the father of the three biggest monsters that destroy everything. The Fenris wolf that kills Odin, the world serpent that's trying to strangle everything and he eventually kills Thor, and then there's Hel, the goddess of the underworld that she kind of just lets the dead people go and everybody dies in a big fiery death because Loki helped the fire giant people come to Asgard and burn everything down. He's the biggest bad guy of Ragnarok, sort of. And it seems that that kind of connection is something that you could work with if the guy in Demon Reach that everybody wants to know about is Merlin, since he feels so guilty and that he deserves to be in prison like that. Maybe he's Merlin Loki person that caused whatever's going to happen in the apocalyptic trilogy. So I guess we can go back to the terrible news that Butcher is just hanging over everybody's head.
Murphy's
Uh,
dead? Is that what
No,
you're talking about?
she's not. She's
Are you
not
talking
dead.
about the fact, the absolute 100% fact that Murphy is dead?
No, she's not dead. Is Einherjar dead?
I mean, he said there's a funeral for Murphy. What could that possibly mean?
Well,
If you've read the
technically, yes, they are dead because that's our whole point is that they're fallen warriors that have come back, right? So, anyway,
yeah,
but I'm sure you
the,
could explain that. So,
yeah, the Einherjar are the warriors training at Valhalla. Sigmund Guard said that they did that for 4,000 years, but it doesn't really match up with the timeline. I think I don't know. But in Aftermath, after Changes, Sigmund Guard was personally impressed with Murphy, and she started saying "Hail, warrior" and honoring her in that way. And it seems like a pretty obvious hint that Murphy is going to get an upgrade, specifically since Guard said that she might get a call from Vadarum. And if she does die, I figure that she'd come back as an Einherjar, not a Valkyrie, because I think that'd be too weird, but just a fighter the way that she is. But there's some specific things that have to happen for that. She has to die in battle, otherwise it won't work. The biggest tragedy of Norse mythology is Baldur's death, because he was the most beloved son of Odin and Frigg, and when he died, it wasn't in battle, it was just an accident. Also caused by Loki, by the way. And if she just dies of sickness, then she's dead. That's it. But if she dies as maybe the result of somebody big and bad doing something wrong and infringing on her choice, maybe Uriel will come out and help her a little bit, or she comes back as 9 That's what I hope.
so I'm sitting here laughing to myself because I just realized that the possibility of him RoboCopping Murphy is like with this idea. She's a cop. Her name's Murphy. She dies in battle. They rebuild her more powerful, give her upgrades. It was the upgrade word that really got me. So now all she needs to say is "Dead or alive, punk, you're coming with me," and we got the whole thing. So that's now my prediction. So that he's going to RoboCop Murphy. So that
Mm. Yeah. If she's good, if Jim Butcher was going to use the dead and yet he comes back thing on anyone other than Harry, I'd say that he'd do it to Murphy because she's Murphy. And we get to deal with Harry being torn apart by the fact that she's dead, which just like it's a nice mix as long as she gets to come back.
and its balance, and honestly that would solve a lot of the problems that a lot of the practical problems that people have with the Karen and Harry ship, and the fact that she's going to get old and she's not going to be there. And you can even sort of see her getting old, even though she's still quite capable in Skin Game. There's definitely, like she doesn't heal like Harry does. Some of the things that she's run into are potentially going to be debilitating, and that's not going to stop her because that's how she is. But yeah, if it would provide a balance, in a sense that it happened to Harry, or yeah, Harry went away, came back, it tormented Karen. Karen goes away, comes back. Hell, maybe Dresden goes and gets her because he's that kind of dude, but that seems like a big deal and kind of a Skin Game book anyway. So I feel like more like somebody like Uriel or Vatarung would say, "Nope, she's gone. Sorry." Maybe we'll see her again later. I don't think. But anyway, it would give some balance and it would give some strength to their relationship in the sense that now she can kind of keep up with him, and she won't age out like he did, or like he was afraid of, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting that you point that out, like the Skin Game thing. Like the Hercules Disney movie, Harry now knows how to get into the hell underworld of Hades and get back out.
But he couldn't do it by himself, so like he'd have to find an Anna
He could
Asher,
get
right? So
like Sarissa or someone who probably has fire magic.
I You're right. However, Titania's still there, and she has a way of meddling with her daughters. And if you think she was pissed off about about Summer Night, like you just waited till she gets to talk to him about Cold Days in this next book of all books. I'm sure we're going to see some of that. So
Yeah. But it is still technically there, like a hanging lantern. Hmm. Something that was interesting when reading about the Norse mythology was the fact that the origin of the cosmos was like there's a land of ice, and then there's a land of fire, and then there's this giant gap in between. And then eventually they got mixed enough that there became Midgard, which is Earth. It seems like that's a pretty obvious analog for like summer and winter, and then there's the Earth. You guys think that's crazy? That like all the origin is the same?
no, no, I like it. The my one thing is that why haven't we seen the ice and fire giants then? So he's got the opportunity to introduce those, but he's definitely had the Norse touches there, and he's definitely had the Greek touches there. But there are some bigger players that he hasn't showed off. Like if there's an entire nation of fire and ice giants, you think that would have been mentioned at some point. So
Actually, it kind of was in Changes. There was just a line of Harry's asking for help, and Vatarung says, "When the Jotuns retreated, dot dot dot," and like his children are scattered over the world, and that was it. That was the last mention of them. But the Jotuns were there, and they're just gone now, which made me wonder: are they the outsiders?
oh no, no, I don't think that, but it does kind of go back to the whole like you know talking about rulers who've kept their promises, and said he was going to bring an end to the ice giants, and I don't see any ice giants around. But if the fire giants have got to be there if they're being used by Loki and Ragnarok, right? So, you know, they're either somewhere deep, deep in Summer, and really we haven't gone into Summer so much because Summer hates Harry, and they kept the White Council out during the Vampire War. So it's still there, but it's just interesting that think of something that's big and scary like Elder Gruff, but actually big and scary. So it would. I dig it. I like the idea of it for sure.
Um, there's more parallels with the Ragnarok thing if we just kind of step away from the literary part of it. In Cold Days, Batarang mentions the Banefire. If they get the bad guys out of Demon Reach, there's the failsafe Banefire that'll blow everything to hell, which is what Harry was trying to stop originally. So what if the Jotuns are the bad guys kept in Demon Reach? And the fire that would destroy the world is just the failsafe.
I think it's a possibility, but I don't know if it seems like there's way too many of them, and that they're not big and scary enough to like warrant that kind of treatment. Because we're talking about, Demon Reach has got things like the Nagloshi, which are stupid scary, and then they were the least of the things. So the Nagloshi would be even more scary than ice giants, in my opinion. And having an entire nation of monsters down there seems a little far fetched, but or world, depending on because it sort of seems like both interchangeably to me in Norse mythology, but um, so there are things that are as big as a house down there, but not all of them are, because there would at least be hundreds or thousands of them, I would imagine. So I don't know. Maybe there is stored in a box somewhere or something. It's bigger on the inside, so but
Yeah, maybe just like the biggest ones were kept in Demon Reach. All the rest of them were killed. So I don't know. It just God, how many of there's like 12 or 13. It's conflicting whether there's 12 or 13 tunnels down in Demon Reach, and each of them has about a dozen or more. So you could get a decent amount of just terrible terrors that can destroy everything. But we'll find out more eventually. Right faster, damn it. And pretty much the last thing before we just get off into crazy conspiracy theories probably is the Battle of Hastings is mentioned an odd amount of times. Titania says that she has not spoken to Mab since before Hastings, which leads Harry to say that there's almost 1,000 years, or almost a millennia, of dysfunction in this family. Because it happened in 1066, and that is considered the year that ended the Viking Age. There's also some other warlord that died, and everybody just kind of went away. But before then, what was the balance of power before? Like, was everything held by the Vikings and all the Norse people, and then it just kind of got switched to Mab and Titania to take care of the outsiders? Also, there's these characters called Disir in Norse mythology. They're basically like evil women people that come out and try to kill you. The stories are pretty conflicting about what they do, but they're generally bad guys. And in one of the textbooks, they were described as Gaelic fetches. To make of that what you will.
yeah, the switching powers thing has always been something that I've been curious about because there's very clearly been dynasties in the Dresden verse. So, back in the day it was the Greeks, before that who knows, then it was the Norse, presumably is what you're talking about, and now it's the fairies. And it's kind of interesting because, like, compared to, stuff like the Brothers Grimm and the man himself, Shakespeare, and things like that. Like, there aren't new epics being written about the fairies. You kind of get the hint that it's all, well, I mean, that Tolkien had something to do with it, so he's increased their power that way. That Disney's certainly helping keep them around, but I don't know if it's the same level of commitment that you had during like the Greek eras and the Norse eras where they're actually being worshipped and that sort of thing. So either the implication is that Disney's billions and billions of dollars a year is actually keeping the fairies around in other media like that, or is their power diminishing as well, and who's next? And unfortunately, they don't talk at all whatsoever about how that happens because most of the gods seem to diminish and then go, but a couple of them survive, or at least a couple of them survive and still meddle in the affairs of mortals and that sort of thing. So
Yep. It's pretty much the last of the facts I have, except there's just a couple things I think I forgot. Like in the short story Heorot, I have no idea how to pronounce that. The Grendelkin calls Guard a Geat. Yet, I don't know, it's spelled Geat, and it basically means that she's connected to Beowulf. So she's like actually kind of related to him, or from the same clan or something. Just from southern Sweden. Mm. And that would mean like Beowulf actually happened and stuff. Because I think that was something. Yeah, whatever.
I think that's kind of the underlying assumption that Butcher uses, anyways, is that anything we classify as a myth actually happened. It's just, the mortals don't like to think about it. So, yeah, using the Grendelkin and the fairies and everything else, like, that's just his default thing. Like, what if all the fables weren't fables? How do we incorporate that into the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex, you've been too quiet, so you need to start sharing.
I don't know. I don't. There. I I find the Norse mythology stuff interesting, but I don't know. I'm kind of just listening, really. I don't have a lot to contribute. Um, I mean, Odin has definitely been one of my favorite characters. I think we haven't seen as much. Do you guys think we're going to see more of him as like a lot more of him as the series goes on? I think the amount that we've seen of Odin has kind of spiked exponentially, especially after Cold Days. What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely. And we should be seeing a lot more of him.
Right. I mean, he's a powerful fairy, and Dresden is now on the other side of the fence in my mind. That the main thing between changes is that he's moving away from the mortal realm and much more into the fairy never never type stuff. So Vatarung's basically as his main ally on that side. He's pulling punches for him, he's giving him help, that sort of thing. So definitely we're going to see that increase, and certainly he's going to be involved in peace talks in some capacity. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens, and if that comes to a head, and if that's the dynastic change that feels like it could be coming for the fairy side of Never Never. And it seems like, compared to how much we're building up peace talks in our mind, that Mirror Mirror is going to be really cool, but it's going to be a complete left turn from where we are currently. And I think maybe that's part by design as well, is that basically it seems like there's a path, and Dresden is going down this path, and the fairies are building him up and all this power, and then other Dresden screws that up for everybody and pulls him out and they do their battle and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, certainly Vatarung's gonna have to be involved in peace talks in some capacity. So
That kind of obvious involvement of tons of powerful people that makes me so excited for these talks. Everybody's going to get upset, and there's going to be like fighting, and you know that there's going to be fighting, and fuck you, there's not going to be a funeral.
yes, they're all gonna sit down to have tea, and nobody's gonna die or anything.
No, Murphy's dead. So,
Fuck you.
hmm. I also think Guard's place has been really interesting. So you're saying do you think she's more powerful than we've seen?
Well, most definitely.
Yeah. I guess, and it's kind of hinted throughout the series that like she's always doing stuff in the background that we don't really see.
We'll never get to see her like do her magic. And if we did, other than like the rune carved knife thing, if we did, I'd probably get a lot more information about it. But yeah.
How so? How do I phrase this? I mean, what is Odin's like typical? How do I phrase this? What What do you think is going to be his involvement in the fight against the outsiders? Is there anything that points to Odin like being kind of like a player in this whole thing?
Well, in the stories of Ragnarok, he went to fight the wolf, and the wolf killed him, and then his son avenged him. So he knows that he's going to die. He's just trying to get everybody else into a position that they can do a little bit better. And he kind of seems to arrange things so that Balder gets to come back after all the fighting happens. And there's a sense of progression that, okay, one world ended and another one is going to start up. So that could be his focus in this. But it's likely that he knows a lot more than anyone else, possibly more than like Mab, if he knows more like prophecies and things, and he can like mess with time. Then he probably knows something, and I figure that he's gonna die at Ragnarok or Dresden Ragnarok, and knows it and he's okay with it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I always assume that when he's talking about the big apocalyptic trilogy, he's pointing to more of a Judeo-Christian type of thing rather than Ragnarok.
It's probably all of them.
Yeah.
So the real question is, who's afraid of the big bad wolf, and who's the big bad wolf? I think that's the thing. have we met this person? Are we going to meet this person who throws down? Like it'll be interesting. But yeah, with Butcher, it seems like yeah, it definitely feels like it's been more of the Judeo-Christian in the sense, but also because Outsiders, it's the H.P. Lovecraft sense, and very likely it's going to at least look similar to any other mythologies that have been introduced so far. He's going to borrow from them somehow. So, sure, while we've got angels fighting the Denarians while the Outsiders run around eating faces and blowing up mines, then you've got some wolf fighting Odin because reasons. So
Well, the biggest, baddest dog person is Mouse, but I don't see why Mouse and Vateran would be fighting. But it makes me wonder if maybe Mac Finn's assumed child will come back and be problematic, because his curse said that he'd go until the end of days.
nice. Stop it. That's amazing. Yeah. I know that's one of my brother's like main things that it's like when does she come back and is she going to have a kid and all this other stuff because it's not like him to just leave that thread out there, and that feels like entirely what he's done with with that character. So it's going to be, damn it, stop it. So because so here's the other thing. Then you've got, so the is it more powerful because it bred with two werewolves instead of one? Because Dresden took out Daddy like at level 2 roughly or something like that, in the second book, for crying out loud. And so if you're thinking the sun's going to kill Odin, like what has the sun been juicing on where that's a thing? So
Well, people have been talking about that maybe that Fitz is Mac Finn's kid, and I don't know how proof for that, but he can hear Ghost Dresden, so maybe he's got the touch of talent or something. And people are talking about maybe the age has a play in when the curse gets shown. Like, you give birth, first full moon, and you have a baby infant werewolf on your hands, or maybe it waits until puberty to start, or like full adulthood. So it could be that there's a kid running around and he doesn't even know what's going on. And that's possible, or maybe Tara knew something, or maybe the curse really did end because Harry is a powerful wizard, even at level 2.
so what other conspiracies do you got for us?
Well, people have been talking about Demon Reach and whatever the plant is that was growing down into the bottom of the island. That's too far down for most plants. So what if it's Yggdrasil itself? What if that's part of the branch of Yggdrasil? Which is interesting in the fact that it might be a good parallel to the mythology in that there's always like the world serpent, I think, was the one that's always gnawing on the branches of the roots and causing the tree physical pain. And since world serpent is a bad guy, and it could be an analog with bad guys in Demon Reach, it could be that the evil aura exuding off of these guys' body heat is damaging Yggdrasil, and it's just trying to hold them in place. And it would support my idea of Merlin Loki being the same person.
Yeah, I'm starting not to like the Loki Merlin thing even more because it's too good, and I don't want Merlin to turn out to be a bad guy. Like, that I set up all this stuff, and then I'm the reason for the apocalypse. Suckers. So
Well,
Wait, saying that Loki and the original Merlin aren't the same person?
yeah, it has an interesting amount of parallels that it could be
What?
justified.
What?
Yeah,
No, Loki's a trickster god.
Loki was also kind of an apprentice to Odin. Is it something he was accepted into Asgard even though he shouldn't have been. His father was a giant, and he was going by his mother's name, which is really, really bizarre for
But
Asgardian culture.
none of that
And
really fits into the mythos of Merlin, right?
well, we don't know anything about Merlin.
right, and
Yes, we
it
do.
parallels. So, and I mean, really, so Merlin is almost deified by wizard kind at the very least, anyways. So he's at
And
least,
trickster.
But
yeah, he's at least a demi power of some kind, I would imagine.
I'm not
Well, just
talking. Go ahead, Alex.
well, the Like the story that Dresden says of how Merlin got the base at Edinburgh is that he won it in a card game. Come on, he's a trickster.
Not like that though. The Loki's whole purpose is trickster. No, no, no. No. What we
Go
do
read
know.
the stories of Norse mythology.
Well, go read the stories of Merlin. There's lots of backstories about the king. The king and the sword, and all the different stuff about Merlin. None of it really, in my opinion, lines up with Loki. I could be totally wrong.
Okay, knowing everything you know of the Dresden Files, go
Sure.
read the story of Loki in Norse mythology,
Okay.
and then look at it and how it's a very abrupt change in Loki's personality. In kind of the weird timeline of past, present, future of the Norse mythology, there's a very sudden shift in his personality, almost like he got infected by Nemesis. At least that's what your idea was. You could work with it. You could say that Loki, Merlin, was doing awesome things, then destroyed it all, got rid of the thing, or that he made himself stay in the prison of demon rage.
Eh,
I'm not saying it's 100% true, obviously, I can't say that, but
okay,
Butcher
I
could
think it's
do
an
it,
interest. What?
and it'd be just. I'm saying that Jim could do it, and it'd be justified.
Well, I think it's interesting, but I also think it's wrong, and I think Karen Murphy's dead. Two thumbs up. That's what we should call this episode. Episode 6, Karen Murphy is dead. All right, before Alex tries to end the podcast, is there any more conspiracy theories?
I want you guys to tell me what you think.
Justin,
I
you go.
I'm compelled. Your evidence is strong. It's tenuous, as all good conspiracy theories. If there was more than a shred of proof, then it wouldn't be a conspiracy theory. It'd be a fact or a regular kind of theory. But adding in the Nemesis twist was kind of the knife that was like, yeah, that was perfectly placed. That explains everything. But that pretty much says that Nemesis has been running around since much earlier than much earlier than even Stormfront. But at the same time, that also kind of makes sense because it seems like it got a hold of Maeve hundreds of years ago, or at least 100 years ago potentially, because they talk about how Maeve had a backlog that Molly's working through. So working with that timeline, but yeah, the Nemesis piece was enough to push me over to the plausibility side for sure. So
Yay! But Maeve got infected around the time of Proven Guilty. That was when she started being able to lie. Not sure if during Proven Guilty, but somewhere around then, when Leah got expunged.
makes sense, right? Because Leah was the vector. She was the first one to get infected through the Athame, and then
Yeah.
got to Maeve. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. But Rashid said that when Harry was trying to figure out what was going on, the outsiders, oh my God, when has it started? It's since always. So Nemesis has been around for as long as time. But we are pretty much at an hour, so we should wrap up. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that was a really cool discussion. Really cool discussion and a lot of good information about how Norse mythology interacts with the series. Yeah, it was awesome. Right? What do you think, Justin?
I feel smarter now. I
Yeah.
like it. I like seeing the plays in that Butcher hasn't gone here, but he could, and here's the whys, and here's how it's based in mythology. Like I know after my first or second read through, at some point I was going through and researching like Leah and some of the other fairies, and just seeing where all of that came from, and just its Celtic roots and things like that. So it's really cool to see the Norse side and how that ties in for sure.
Yeah. Good job, Alex.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to bring the podcast to a close. Again, DresdenFilesPodcast.com. Email us at DresdenFilesPodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter, Twitter.com/DresdenCast. We're still working on getting the audio, so for for the podcast. But we have episode 1 and 2 up on iTunes. And yeah, just tweet at us, email us with suggestions, comments, and we'll talk about it on the show. All right, see you next time. Thanks, guys.